Right now we're being joined by Marcus Hayes, Philadelphia Daily News. Marcus Hayes, if you're not following him on Twitter, he's probably one of the best local Philadelphia area people to follow. So definitely look him up on Twitter. Marcus, appreciate you joining the show this Saturday afternoon.
Hey, Josh, thanks for the compliment. I'm at Inkstained Wretch, and I am a reluctant, but I would say committed tweeter.
You definitely are committed. I see some of the conversations that you have, and I have to give you credit. Some of the people who say that stuff to you, I would not respond to them, honestly.
Well, a lot of people, they get it used to be email muscles, and now it's Twitter muscles. But, and everybody, people feel very strongly about, well, pretty much everything in their lives, but especially sports. Sports is a release, and it's something they can feel, that gives them an escape. And it's become a religion to a lot of people, and it hasn't to me. So whatever sort of objectivity that I have, I understand I'm dealing with a lot of people who are very subjective, and they care a lot about it, probably a lot more than I do. So, it's it can get a little, I guess, inappropriate sometimes. But, you can always block them or ignore them.
Let me ask you that real quick, because I'm a younger guy. I'm 31 years old, Marcus, and I always wonder the evolution of people getting into Twitter and the reason why they got on Twitter and started the way they did. So can you talk about that for a minute? Because, like I said, I'm 31, so getting on Twitter was one of those things where I was kind of told, well, this is the thing you do, and I got on. What was kind of behind you getting on Twitter and the way you handle people on Twitter? How did that evolve?
We had an edict at my office at the Philadelphia Daily News this year. We'll assign you a Twitter handle, or you can get one, and you will tweet, and we will put your Twitter handle on all your stories. So get on it. It was a mandate. So I probably would not be on Twitter otherwise, but I understand it's how people break news. It's how people get a lot of their news. Sadly, it connects people, and it's a community. I mean, when I say sports is a religion, it's not the only religion. It's religion's religion, sports are religion. Music can be a religion to some people. It's a way for people to connect, and people can be a part of the same thing instantly, and they can be a part of something to the extreme. I mean, you can have very, very inappropriate Game of Thrones conversations on Twitter, the same as you can have inappropriate Sam Hinkie conversations or Chip Kelly conversations. And that's the detriment of Twitter, that it erodes the propriety of society, which I think is awful. I think we need to be better and nicer to each other, and Twitter is exactly the opposite of that. But the service it provides is it keeps people connected who might not otherwise be connected, and gives people a voice who might not otherwise have a voice or be brave enough to have a voice. Somebody who might not call into your show or even email me on Twitter, they can almost assume a different identity and be a different person.
Marcus, just following that up real quick, do you think that Twitter and social media has actually hurt the dialogue of sports conversation and kind of, what made it gone from being maybe a semi-productive conversation to be, much more vitriolic?
I believe Twitter has made every conversation much more vitriolic, and because there's less accountability. But, this goes back to instant and text messaging when you're talking to your friends and your family. My friends and family know that if they want to talk to me about something, they need to call me, because without the inflection of a voice and the immediate accountability, it's hard to gauge how somebody really feels about something and what the next step should be. And that's true in all communication. The more immediate it is, the more real it is. And, my father wouldn't have phone conversations with people. If he wanted to talk to you, almost invariably, he would go to your house and talk to you. But because he wanted to see your body language, he wanted to understand how you reacted to what he said. And he's a very old school, hardcore, farmer, preacher, construction worker. And, his word was his bond, and so was yours, as far as he was concerned. But we're light years away from that now. What's said in Twitter is almost irrelevant. It's And there needs to be accountability whenever, especially when you feel strongly about something and you may say something inappropriate or something with a lot of vitriol, as you said. There needs to be accountability for that, but in Twitter there seldom is.
Let's transition over to the Eagles. You wrote an article over at the Philadelphia Daily News talking about, Carson Wentz and how, the Eagles are letting him mature. I feel like a lot of the conversation that we've had about the Eagles over the last month and a half has been predicated around just Bradford, but we kind of forget there is this guy named Carson Wentz, and the Eagles' plan is to basically redshirt him.
Yeah, I mean, I believe in that. I think that no quarterback should ever have to play their first season in the NFL. There is no college experience that can prepare you for it. And in Carson Wentz's case, his college experience probably prepared him worse than normal, since it's, the FCS 1AA college experience where they just don't have the defensive linemen and linebackers that he's going to be facing, 5 feet away from him every single snap. He's got a long way to go. I like the plan, and, I think what Jim Schwartz, the Eagles defensive coordinator and the former coach of the Indianapolis Colts or Detroit Lions was saying is when they drafted Matthew Stafford, they really wish they had an option where he didn't have to start right away, because Matthew Stafford was clearly not ready. He got hurt his first 2 seasons, according to Schwartz, mainly because he held onto the ball too long, which is a common mistake. It's the most common mistake young quarterbacks have, and, some never get over it, like Donovan McNabb, So, it just makes sense to me to give that guy a AAA season or a redshirt season, as you said.
If I could just backtrack, something you said stood out to me. You said that there should be no quarterback drafted that should start their first year. Can you elaborate that a little bit? Because I think it's interesting because we've seen guys like Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck start their first year, and even though it was a little rough, at times, they kind of found their way.
I believe the amount of pounding you take in your first season as a quarterback, as a young quarterback, is there's no way the benefit outweighs the detriment of that. I mean, the best example has always been Troy Aikman, who had a wonderful career after just being brutalized as a young quarterback. I mean, one thing people have a hard time understanding, quarterbacks are bigger and stronger and faster and better equipped human beings than you and I to take that sort of punishment. However, they are the least well-equipped players on the field to take that sort of punishment, being hit by defensive linemen and linebackers at full speed sometimes. And it's not just the sacks, it's getting hit, and it's getting, having just glancing blows. The amount of punishment taken by a quarterback who doesn't understand what he's looking at is, it's almost criminal to subject someone to that. And there's really no way to replicate it, It used to be the best quarterbacks, they'd come from, like the Pac-10 or the Big 8 or the Big 12 or whatever, or maybe the SEC, where they'd be exposed to the best defenders, the Big 10. But there's just no way to replicate it. I mean, these guys, they're just too big, too strong, too fast, too smart, and they're mean, Would you think about it this way? If the Eagles played the Dolphins this year, would you want Carson Wentz exposed to Ndamukong Suh one time? To me, the answer is clear and easy. It's no. He's not ready for it. And you can't prepare for it. I mean, it's tough enough having a regular NFL season, but unless you have a stud offensive line and a great running back and 2 really good receivers, then that's when you start the conversation for me of not redshirting a rookie quarterback. I mean, it just seems to be a cruel thing to do and a foolish thing to do.
We're talking with Marcus Hayes of the Philadelphia Daily News. You can follow him on Twitter at InkStainedDretch. That's Ink, I-N-K, Stained Dretch. Marcus, speaking of the Eagles, you tweeted out something from Joe Banner, which I thought was very interesting. Joe Banner said, I'm quoting this, "There's no skill in getting players by throwing in games. Anyone can do that. Great teams have great talent evaluators." And then you followed it up by saying, "If the most innovative sports exec in the last 30 years sees this, perhaps you should too." I would like to give you the floor to kind of, expound upon that a little bit, considering you can go more than 140 characters here.
Okay. Joe Banner set the template for how NFL franchises are run, and that's happened within the last 30 years. The most complex business model of the business models is the NFL team, even more so than baseball, because baseball's business model is independent, really, of minor leagues. They don't own those minor league teams. They own the players. They don't own the teams. So Banner had to sort of create from scratch amid a bunch of guys, a bunch of other general managers and executives who didn't have his business background and frankly weren't as smart as him. He had to create sort of from scratch the rules by which the NFL would play for, since really 1992, 93, when free agency and the hard salary cap began. And you saw teams like Dallas or San Francisco win championships but mortgage their futures and be terrible for a while. And you can argue that that's the way to do it. But even those teams now understand that managing the salary cap and staying competitive year after year is a better way to go. Joe Banner signed a restricted free agent like Troy Vincent to a spectacular deal that Miami couldn't match. They did things like cutting veterans at the age of 30, 31, Hugh Douglas, releasing guys, trading guys right past their prime. Really the only one they missed on was Brian Dawkins. They only missed by 2 years. So the thing, Joe Banner was the leading voice behind getting the stadiums built in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. It all came from the same pot back then. So, the things that he did lead me to consider him, overall the most innovative executive, especially for a guy who had no training in the business. He came in and created it from scratch. The most innovative in any sport in the last 30 years. Part A. Part B, Joe's right. You don't have to ensure the worst record to get good players in the NBA. Toronto just lost last night with Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan as their two best players. And, the Golden State Warriors are arguably the most entertaining team. And I think their only, top 3 pick is Andrew Bogut. So, he's right. And he knows what he's talking about, and he's bona fide. The only reason Joe Banner is not working in a front office for a team right now is because he's chosen not to. And I believe he's been a consultant with at least 2 or 3 since he left Cleveland. And he's a law professor at Villanova, and he's finishing raising his kids. So, Joe's an elite sports management mind, and he's got way more credentials in sports, maybe not in basketball, but in sports than Sam Hinkie. And he loves analytics, and he loves innovation. Nobody supported Chip Kelly's hire in Philadelphia or anywhere. He'd hired him in Cleveland if he'd had the chance. Nobody supported Chip Kelly's innovation more than Joe Banner. He understands the numbers. He understands how to apply this to this and this to this, and he understands sports science. However, tanking's easy. Anybody can tank. And, I don't agree with all of Joe's analyses or opinions about the guys Sam Hinkie drafted. But if you're going to draft Michael Carter-Williams and then flip him after a year, it doesn't matter what you flip him for. You've made a mistake on Michael Carter-Williams. You don't waste that pick. You don't waste that investment. You don't waste your coach's time. And I don't disagree with that trade, the Michael Carter-Williams trade. Michael Carter-Williams trade for what they got was good because you don't need Michael Carter-Williams here losing, and even if he's developing, losing, if you can ostensibly replace him in the easiest position to replace, I think, in the draft is point guard. So, but the reality is Joe believes that Sam Hinkie was egregious in his strategy, was egregiously irresponsible in his strategy. And if you're going to listen to anybody, you don't have to listen to me. You don't have to listen to, some other sports writer. Listen to a guy who changed an industry.
Talk with Marcus Hayes of the Philadelphia Daily News. One more question before I let you go. I wanted to ask you, if you're the 76ers, who do you draft number 1 overall? And number 2, do you try to trade Jahlil Okafor for another pick?
See, I don't understand the controversy with either of these or the debate with either of these questions. Ben Simmons did nothing to devalue himself during the college basketball season. Brandon Ingram brought himself up. But Ben Simmons is a really, really intriguing player. I don't know how you pass on him. I think it's a huge risk to pass on him. So Simmons is my guy. And I like Jahlil Okafor. I think you can teach a guy. I think you can encourage a guy to play better defense and rebound. Jahlil Okafor came in as a 19-year-old kid, and I did the research. There's never been a 19-year-old player in the history of the NBA with an offensive game as polished as his. And you can argue it won't get any better. You can argue that he's a bad guy. You can argue any of that stuff. But he's the most polished young post player in the history of the NBA that I could find. And I don't know why you would ever trade him for, like, the number 4 pick where you could take Chris Dunn. Because, you know, he's a generational post player, unless you just don't value that position. And unless you're guaranteed Joel Embiid will be playing more than 50 games this year, which he can't because they've already told us that he's not playing back-to-backs. So it seems like you'd be cutting off your nose to spite your face regardless of what you got, unless you just change the whole template and you don't want an offensive post player. I can't read their minds. I wouldn't trade him, but if they think the team is better, you know, with 1.5 post players and a bunch of perimeter guys, that's their call.
Marcus Age, you can follow him at InkStainedDretch on Twitter. Appreciate you joining me here on Sports Bash Saturday.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you for having me.